What if I told you that the most misunderstood behavior of empaths isn't their sensitivity, but their absolute need for solitude? Stay with me, because what Carl Jung discovered about psychological boundaries will completely transform how you understand why empaths are closing their doors like never before. Carl Jung said that every individual needs what he called psychological space to maintain their sense of self. And nowhere is this more critical than for the modern empath living in an increasingly invasive world. Here's what most people don't understand about empaths and visitors. And trust me, by the end of this, you'll never take their reluctance personally again. According to Carl Jung, the human psyche operates on energy exchanges that most people can't even perceive. When someone enters your space, they don't just bring their physical presence. They bring what Jung called their psychological field, their emotions, their unspoken needs, their energetic demands. And for empaths, this isn't just felt, it's absorbed at a cellular level. Listen carefully to what happens next, because this is where everything makes sense. Jung discovered that empaths operate with what he termed permeable boundaries. While most people have psychological walls that filter incoming energy, empaths have something closer to membranes. They don't just sense what others feel, they involuntarily take it in, process it, and often carry it long after the visitor has left. But here's where it gets absolutely fascinating, and why empaths are protecting their space more fiercely than ever before. Carl Jung understood that every interaction requires what he called psychological expenditure. For most people, having visitors is simply tiring. For empaths, it's energetically catastrophic. They're not just making small talk. They're unconsciously managing the emotional states of everyone in the room. They're reading micro-expressions, sensing unspoken tensions, absorbing anxieties, and trying to maintain what Jung termed the collective equilibrium. The empath doesn't just host a visitor. They become responsible for that person's emotional experience in their home. Here's what Jung discovered that will blow your mind. Empaths experience what he called psychic overwhelm when their personal sanctuary is invaded by external energies. Your home isn't just where you live. It's where you restore what Jung termed your psychological integrity. It's where you shed the emotional residue you've collected from the world. It's your energetic fortress. And when visitors arrive, that fortress is breached. According to Carl Jung's research on introverted feeling types, empaths require extended periods of what he called inner processing. Every conversation, every emotional exchange, every energetic transaction needs to be digested psychologically. But when visitors are present, this processing stops completely. The empath goes into performance mode, what Jung called the persona activation, where their authentic self retreats and their social mask takes over. But here's the part that will send chills down your spine. Jung discovered that empaths pay a devastating price for this masking. Every hour spent in persona mode requires hours of recovery in authentic mode. A 2-hour visit from a friend might require an entire day of solitude to recover from. And most people have absolutely no idea this exchange is happening. They think the empath is being antisocial. Jung understood they were being self-preservational. Listen to what happens in the empath's psyche when someone knocks on their door. According to Carl Jung, there's an immediate activation of what he called the anxiety of intrusion. It's not personal, it's psychological. The empath instantly calculates the energetic cost of the interaction. They scan for the visitor's emotional state. They prepare for the inevitable absorption of whatever energy that person is carrying. And in today's world, that energy is heavier than ever before. Carl Jung observed that collective unconscious stress affects empaths disproportionately. The anxiety of our modern age, the political tensions, the economic pressures, the social fragmentation. Empaths don't just read about these things. They feel them in every person who enters their space. Every visitor becomes an unconscious ambassador of the world's chaos, and the empath's home becomes a battlefield instead of a sanctuary. But here's where Jung's insight becomes absolutely game-changing. According to Carl Jung, The most psychologically healthy individuals are those who honor what he called their authentic needs without guilt. Empaths are finally learning that saying no to visitors isn't rudeness. It's what Jung termed self-preservation at the soul level. They're recognizing that their need for solitude isn't a flaw to be fixed, but a requirement to be respected. The awakened empath understands something profound. Their energy is finite, their capacity is limited, their peace is sacred. Jung discovered that empaths who ignore these truths pay the ultimate price, what he called fragmentation of the self. They become anxious, depleted, resentful. They lose connection with their inner world because they're constantly managing the outer one. They sacrifice their psychological wholeness on the altar of social expectations. But the transformed empath, they make a different choice entirely. Carl Jung said that true individuation requires the courage to disappoint others in service of your authentic self. The empath who has reached psychological maturity stops apologizing for closed doors. They stop over-explaining their need for space. They stop feeling guilty for protecting their sanctuary. They reach what Jung called energetic sovereignty, complete ownership of their psychological borders. And here's what happens when an empath finally honors this truth. According to Carl Jung, when someone establishes what he termed appropriate boundaries, they don't become cold or isolated. They become more genuinely available in the moments they do choose to engage. The empath who protects their solitude fiercely can offer authentic presence generously when they decide to open their door. They stop operating from obligation and start operating from choice. Jung discovered that this conscious selectivity creates what he called qualitative relationships over quantitative ones. The empath stops hosting people out of guilt and starts inviting people out of genuine desire. Their home stops being a social obligation and becomes what it was always meant to be, a sacred space for restoration and authentic self-expression. But here's the final piece that makes everything clear. Carl Jung understood that empaths are not antisocial. They're selectively social. They're not avoiding people. They're avoiding energetic depletion. They're not being rude. They're being honest about their psychological reality in ways most people never have to consider. The empath who closes their door is actually opening themselves to something far more valuable: the relationship with their own inner world, the connection to their authentic self, the peace that comes from honoring their true nature rather than performing for others. This is why empaths don't like visitors more than ever. Not because they've become bitter or isolated, but because they've become wise. They've learned what Carl Jung spent his lifetime teaching, that psychological health requires fierce protection of your inner world, conscious management of your energy, and the courage to honor your authentic needs even when the world doesn't understand them. And that, according to Jung's profound insight, is not weakness. It's the ultimate act of self-respect.